The Committee on International Relations and Economic Development will now come to order. Clerk, record the roll.
Button,
Here.
Ordaz, Bumgarner,
Here.
Clardy, Hayes,
Here.
Mesa,
Here.
Morales,
Here.
Plesha, Shine.
Here.
A quorum is present. If you wish to testify, please register at the iPad kiosk located in the hallway behind this hearing room to respect it. Oh, I guess we don't need to. Okay,
You got your first Philip?
this is fine. Okay, oh, yeah. Okay, good morning. Thank you for coming, and we're gonna have a pretty good agenda. Not that packed, so we will have plenty time to discuss a lot of good questions. The chair lays out HB 865 and recognizes Representative Gervin Hawkins to explain the bill. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
So good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see all of y'all this morning. And thank you, Chairman Button and members for this great opportunity to lay out House Bill 865. Members, concerned parties have noted that many workforce development boards regularly fail to meet statutory requirements and performance standards established under the Labor Code. You know, I think we all have our workforce boards in our local community, and we know how valuable workforce is to many of our constituents. So House Bill 865 seeks to address this issue by permitting nonprofit service providers to apply directly for funding from the Texas Workforce Commission if the local workforce board fails to meet 80% of their performance standards for 2 years. For me, as a workforce provider for many years, we've got to make sure that our workforce boards are effective, getting things done, and sometimes a monopoly creates complacency. And so for me, it's critical that we create as many on-ramps for people to get trained and or get placed in employment. This will allow nonprofit service providers to access funding for a variety of helpful programs, such as job training programs funded under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, post-secondary vocational and technical job programs, employment services, support service, wraparound services, which is provided to our recipients who need the financial assistance, and employment and training programs for recipients of supplemental nutrition assistance, which is called SNAP. Members, it's not just enough to simply just provide resources for our constituents. It is our responsibility to provide the tools and skills necessary to achieve financial independence and to achieve upward social mobility so that they no longer have to depend on the state. HB 865 will ensure that we meet that responsibility. Why is this so important? I remember back in the day in my hometown, San Antonio, where we had 5 or 6 providers that could reach out to different communities, that was relevant and knew the folks from the community. Now we have one sole source provider, and we have not met the need of many of our constituents, even though we have more jobs. So as we look at fulfilling job opportunities, we've got to look at how we deliver those services. So when we look at our different communities within our district, they're different and their needs are different. How they access and the knowledge about services are different. So it is so important that we broaden the opportunity rather than have one workforce board with one service providers, that we open it up to those nonprofits who are effectively doing the work. And notice HB 865 says only if the workforce board is not meeting the needs. And with that, Madam Chair, I reserve my right to close, unless there's any questions.
Yes, not that much a question. I just want to comment on your spirit. You're absolutely right. The competition bring out the best result, and we cannot be complacent. We need to see if the entire, especially San Antonio, is growing very fast.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely. And thank you for bringing this bill to us. Appreciate that. Members, any questions? Yes. Yeah, go ahead. You're the next one. Okay, so I saw that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
You mean?
No.
You go ahead.
Okay.
Representative Meza,
morning.
please.
Morning.
And in reading this in preparation for the meeting today, I'd like for you to respond to what they wrote in the Legislative Budget Board analysis, kind of in the middle of that part. It says, according to TWC, enactment of the bill could result in a conformity issue with federal law, which requires the allocation of 85% of its workforce innovation opportunities, Title I funds, to local workforce development boards, based on specific funding formulas outlined in federal law, to be used by boards for the operation of the various WIOA programs. Additionally, enactment of the bill would result in a conformity issue with the labor code of this state, which does not allow for the direct funding application model as proposed in the bill. So I'd like for you to address that.
So when we look at workforce development, we have created, so again, I have a 30-year history in workforce development. So historically, well, particularly in San Antonio, the city was basically, I'll call it the umbrella. And they procured different providers. We went to a new model, and that new model was development of these workforce boards. I want us to work through the workforce boards, so we will not be adding any additional dollars. We will, and whoever is the nonprofit that is the recipient of these dollars would have to follow federal law, because as we know, there's allowable costs, unallowable costs. There's specific performance matrix that has to be made. So it will be in conjunction with the workforce board. But what I'm concerned about is the workforce boards, and this is where we get to intent in law. The workforce board has designated themselves as the only provider, okay, which has limited, and so instead of, I'll say, managing more than one contract, they will be managing the other contracts also. So it will not be outside of the intent and the framework of workforce. What it does is encourages the workforce board not to stick with just one provider.
So you feel like the way your bill's set up, it avoids these conflicts that they talk about on conformity issues with federal law and labor code?
No doubt about it, because what I don't want is any nonprofit to get in trouble in terms of not following the federal law. So when we think about the WIA program, the WIA program is the out-of-school youth program, okay? And so historically, most kids could participate in workforce development. When they, what I call flip the switch, and said that 80% of the young people that you serve has to be out-of-school youth, that's 80% versus 20% of the other. We've left that C student off the table. Okay, and we're going after the D and E students. But I believe if all boats rise, it would be a good thing. But who knows best where those kids are? And that's our nonprofits. And I believe we've created this bureaucracy that has not been as effective as it should be.
I served on the Tarrant County Workforce Development Board, so I
Okay.
have a little bit of,
Background on that, yes, yeah. But you understand what I'm saying in terms of one provider, one focus, limited knowledge, versus opening it up under the workforce umbrella to many different providers who can connect to the people who need it most.
okay, well, thank you for answering that question and responding to that.
Yes, great question.
I think it's important that if we see something like that, to give you the opportunity to address it rather than it just being in a thought in our mind.
Yeah, yes, because I think a lot of times, again, when folks who see these things have a certain level of intent, but I know what my intent is, and I want to make sure that that translates into what the service providers will be doing.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
How many local workforce development boards would fit this definition right now?
In the state of Texas, I don't know. I know in San Antonio, we have not met the needs of our constituents. I can only assume that anyone that has that one service provider model, that sole source, is having challenges. Also, what I've heard throughout the state of Texas is that our young people still are underemployed, majorly so. And so that anecdotally tells me that there's some deficiencies in the program. Think about the state of Texas, y'all, and the type of jobs that we have, but yet they're not being filled. But yet we're graduating thousands of young people every year. So why aren't we courting those young people? Is the lack of connectivity. So for me, when we say we have a shortage of workforce, that's a fallacy because we're graduating thousands of young people. I come originally from Detroit, Michigan, where the goal was graduate high school, work for one of the big three.
Right.
Why aren't we doing that here? Why aren't we filling those cybersecurity jobs? Why aren't we filling these medical jobs? Why aren't we building pipelines with our young people? That tells me the workforce system needs some support.
Thank you.
Very good. Just one more question. Let me clarify. This bill is not just for the San Antonio?
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is?
No,
No, it's across the board.
State of Texas.
Just wanna, yeah, verify. And any other questions? We'll call you back.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, do this first.
Let the record reflect Vice Chair Odas and Representative Claudia are now present. The chair calls Courtney Arbor. We show you registered as Courtney Arbor, testify on behalf of Texas Workforce Commission, and that you are neutral, you are on the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Great. You have any statement? Otherwise, just questions for you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, please. Representative Shaw.
So, Ms. Arbor, in looking across the state, does the Workforce Commission, have you identified some boards that are not functioning effectively, efficiently, or in a manner of accountability?
There is a report that is published each year on the boards and their performance in a number of areas that are established in statute or rule. There is always a board who is failing in one area. They've had a performance improvement plan on one of the performance measures, or not met expenditures, or perhaps had some type of administrative issue. Overall, our reports and the contracted measures would show that they are overseeing the programs in accordance with the expectations, and they may be failing a performance metric, but they're overwhelmingly meeting most of them. And those measures are employed at the second quarter after they've been served, or the fourth quarter, how they're doing on helping the participants gain a credential or further their education. But there are always boards on some type of technical assistance plan or sanction action based on one of many different measurings.
How do y'all respond to that?
They're placed, it's defined in the agency rule. There is a process for putting boards on a corrective action called a technical assistance plan. That one is kind of the first step. It's jointly developed with the workforce board, where we agree to a higher level of reporting that they will provide to us, and we provide more hands-on technical assistance. From there, it escalates to various sanctions that have a monetary impact.
So if the board doesn't respond to your elevated overwatch, then I guess, do you have the authority then to remove board members?
There is a process in the law to redesignate a board if it were to the point that they were refusing or not meeting expectations consistently. In that case, we would work with the local elected officials, the Texas Workforce Investment Council, to take the steps to do that.
Okay. Have you, since we've focused on Representative Hawkins' San Antonio comments, do we have some issues with the TWC in San Antonio?
I believe what you're talking about is people going unserved in the area and the outreach not being effective. The way the structure is set up, where you can find value is that the boards, at least every 5 years, have to re-procure their service providers. The boards are defined in the law, so the Alamo Board is defined, but they have to re-procure service providers, and there's no limit on the number of providers, and very often they are nonprofits. So a strong application during that procurement period, which happens again no less than every 5 years, is where services can be, the competition happens.
All right, thank you.
All right. Any other, yes, go ahead, Representative Meza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you heard my question of the representative in laying out her bill. So would you please respond to that from the point of view of the TWC? Is there an issue about enactment of the bill resulting in conformity issues with federal law or labor code?
The conformity issue that we pointed out in our analysis was we as an agency would not be able to direct fund a nonprofit with the 85% that by law must be allocated to the workforce boards. Now, the workforce boards have service providers and they procure those, and that's where the local competition can be improved in any area if the service provider contracted by the board is not meeting the expectations of the elected officials.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against HB 865? The chair recognizes Representative Gervin Hawkins to close.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members, those were great questions. One of the things as a service provider I want to express, a lot of times folks just check the boxes, okay? We've checked off this box and that box. We need effective programming. Effective programming, I think most of you can agree with this, is that when people perform better, when they know people and they know their needs and they're comfortable and they can address those needs. Can many of the workforce boards check off boxes? Yeah. But is the program effective is the question. And so by moving it to more than one service provider working under the umbrella of the workforce and being able to expand, we're talking about my community is different from your community versus North Side versus East Side, South Side, or whatever. So those service providers need to be relevant. And what I have seen through my 30 years in workforce development is so easy to check off the box. So the oversight is there, but if we're not meeting the goal, but yet we have the demand, the state of Texas will never meet its employment goals. And that's what this bill seeks to do, is to put that pressure on a workforce board to make sure that they're extending their arms out to the people who are most in need and being able to fill these jobs. That's why we look in the state of Texas, the level of poverty that we have among youngsters, the level of unemployed people and unemployable people, but yet we put a vast amount of dollars in workforce development. You have to ask yourself, why isn't that in alignment? And it's not in alignment because our providers that can write a good application during the procurement can check the box off. But are they reaching out to those most in need? Are they providing the most effective services? Are they able to get to a broad number of people that need services? And I can emphatically say that is not happening. I'm an eyewitness to it. With that, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to answer any additional questions. And if there's no questions, I will close. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Representative Galati.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Representative Gervin Hawkins, for bringing this bill. Are there any concerns that if we adopt this bill that provides for direct funding to the providers and bypasses the Texas Workforce Commission handling the money, that it in any way invalidates the federal funding? That this comports with federal law? And I'm unfamiliar with the details of this as you are, but if we skip straight from Fed money to direct providers, or any risk that we would lose funding because it doesn't comport with federal?
No, it still comes, this bill still comes to the workforce, the Texas Workforce Commission. So that still happens. The oversight is still there. I don't want to circumvent or go around. What I'm saying is, if indeed the needs are not being met in a local community, then that workforce board is pressured to say you now have to go out to additional nonprofits. So we don't want to circumvent a system. What we're saying is we want to enhance and add to, rather than the workforce board say, or the Texas Workforce Commission saying we can only use this provider.
I just don't want us to come back and the Fed say, no, you can't do that, therefore the money's not available.
No. And if we need to clarify it more, because of the intent is to expand, not to go around or in lieu of, but truly to expand those opportunities to those nonprofits that know the community, can provide that mentorship and that stewardship that's so critical to help our young people be successful, or anybody in the workforce pipeline.
Very good. And I just want to thank you for wearing burnt orange today in recognition of the SFA to the UT system bill that I'll have on the floor today. So thank you for your support.
You're welcome.
Members, any other questions? We have a lively discussion. Thank you very much for being here, and HB 865 will be left pending at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Ms. T, can you finish our pending business voting before people have to go to another event? Okay, thank you. The chair lays out HB 1338 as pending business. Members, you remember this bill by Representative Rainey relating to the participation of community-based organizations in workforce training programs funded by the Skills Development Fund. The chair offers a committee substitute to HB 1338. Is there any objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the substitute is adopted. Representative Morales moves HB 1338 as substituted to be reported to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Button.
Aye.
Ordaz. Baumgartner. Clardy.
Aye.
Hayes. Mesa. Morales. Plesha. Shine.
There being 8 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 1723 as pending business. Members, you remember this bill by Representative Raymond relating to requiring the Department of Information Resources to conduct a study concerning the cybersecurity of small businesses. The chair offers a committee substitute to HB 1723. Is there any objection to the option of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the substitute is adopted. The Representative Hayes moves that HB 1723 as a substitute to be reported to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Button.
Aye.
Ordaz. Baumgartner. Clardy.
Aye.
Hayes. Mesa. Morales. Plesha. Shine.
Aye.
There being 8 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 2302 as pending business. Members, you remember this bill by Representative Ann Johnson relating to certain requirements for the operational component of a local workforce development board's local plan. Representative Ordaz, Chairwoman Valdez moves that HB 2302 without amendments be reported to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Button.
Aye.
Ordaz. Baumgartner.
Nay.
Clardy. I'm
Aye.
sorry. Baumgartner, was that at?
Nay.
Nay. Clardy.
Aye.
Hayes. Mesa. Morales. Plesha. Shine.
Aye.
There being 7 ayes and 1 nays, the motion prevails. Do we have Julie Johnson's bill?
It's coming. I'm just going in order.
The chair lays out HB 2975 as pending business. Members, you remember this bill by Chairman Gideon relating to powers and duties of the Texas Workforce Commission with respect to work and family policies. Representative Baumgartner moves that HB 2975 without amendments be reported to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Local Consent calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Button.
Aye.
Ordaz. Baumgartner. Clardy.
Aye.
Hayes. Mesa. Morales. Palacia. Shine.
Aye.
There being 8 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 3771 as pending business. Members, you remember this bill by Representative Julie Johnson relating to the creation of the Employer Child Care Contribution Partnership Program administered by the Workforce Commission, authorize a civil penalty. The chair offers a committee substitute to HB 3771. Is there any objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the substitute is adopted. Representative Mesa moves that HB 3771 as a substitute to be reported to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Button.
Aye.
Ordaz. Baumgartner. Clardy.
Aye.
Hayes. Mesa. Morales. Palacia. Shine.
Aye.
There being 7 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 4309 as pending business. Members, you remember this bill by Chairwoman Victoria Neavet Corrado. I'm still working on her first married name. Relating to prohibiting certain non-disclosure or confidentiality provisions in employment agreements. Representative Shine moves that HB 4309 without amendments be reported to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Button.
Aye.
Ordaz. Baumgartner. Clardy.
Aye.
Hayes. Mesa. Morales. Palacia. Shine.
Aye.
There being 8 ayes and 0 nays, motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 18.
Hold on. I'm missing one. No, there's one more bill. 47. It was the Lopez bill?
4734.
The chair lays out HB 4734 as pending business. Members, you remember this bill by Representative Jenny Lopez relating to a study relating this state's business advantages, economic climate and workforce readiness, and a report on attracting offshore wind energy supply chain business to this state. Representative Hayes moves that HB 4734 without amendments be reported to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll. That being
Button.
Aye.
Ordaz. Baumgartner. Nay. Clardy.
Aye.
Hayes. Mesa. Morales. Palacia and Shine.
Aye.
There being 7 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails. Okay, the chair lays out HB 1834 and recognizes Chairman Thompson to explain the bill. Good morning, Ms. T, and thanks for your patience.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson, and good morning to the committee. Thank you so much for allowing me to lay out this wonderful piece of legislation. Presently, within our state, we have many child care providers that are not based on, reimbursements are not based on actual cost of providing child care. And Texas care providers set tuition prices based on what families can afford to pay, which means that in low-income communities, providers can't charge enough to supply quality child care. Currently, Texas law does not allow the Texas Workforce Commission to reimburse providers more than their published rate, even if the child care providers have met quality benchmarks through the Texas Rising Star Program, which merits a higher reimbursement but serves in a low-income community. And what this actually means is that child care providers in low-income communities loses money for providing high-quality care. Child care quality, not the income of parent, should really determine the child's reimbursement rate. This bill ensures that child care providers in the Texas Workforce Commission system receives a reimbursement based on the quality of their program by requiring the maximum reimbursement for the provider's rating under the Texas Rising Star Program, regardless of the published rate. And I have a witness, Madam Chairperson, if there are questions that I may answer to this outstanding committee, I'm available.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
May I
And-
reserve my right to close, please?
Yeah, definitely. Hold on, let me make
Yes.
sure that members, any questions for Ms. T? No question?
We have several witnesses.
Okay, we have several witnesses. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Well,
Thank you.
definitely has
Thank
to
you.
come back, okay? The chair calls Melanie Rubin. We show you registered as Melanie Rubin, testify on behalf of North Texas Early Education Alliance that you are for the bill. Is this correct?
That is correct.
Hi,
Good
to
morning.
see you again.
Nice to
Good
see you.
morning.
Good morning.
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Button and Chair Thompson and members of the committee. I am Melanie Rubin, Director of the North Texas Early Education Alliance, and here to testify in support of HB 1834. HB 34 builds on the efforts that were passed last session to recognize the importance of breaking down barriers and increasing access to affordable, quality childcare. Research clearly points to the academic gains young children make when they are in high-quality early childhood education programs. Throwing public funds at programs that do not implement these educational best practices is simply throwing funding away. We can invest in quality early learning so that children show up to school ready to learn, or we can spend even more public funding remediating and trying to catch these children up. A responsible and fiscally strategic solution is for the state to fund quality early learning. Texas's current implementation of the federally funded child care subsidy system does not currently reimburse participating child care providers on the actual cost of providing quality care. Instead, Texas child care providers set tuition prices based on what families can afford to pay. Therefore, in some Texas communities, providers cannot charge enough to support this care. This has contributed to a shortage of child care options, which limit parents' ability to go to work. In fact, between March 2020 and September 2021, 21% of child care providers closed statewide. As a result of these losses, an additional 242 communities throughout the state became child care deserts, a nearly 62% increase statewide. Further, a recent Texas AEYC statewide survey shows that when federal relief dollars end this fall, 44% of responding child care programs indicate that their program is likely or may be likely to close within the next year. HB 1834 will address a key obstacle for providers who meet quality benchmarks through the state's Texas Rising Star program, meriting a higher reimbursement but serving a community in poverty, which has driven that rate too low to pay for quality. It will ensure that childcare subsidy public funds reimburse providers that produce positive outcomes for children and produce cost savings to the state in the long run. These childcare programs have already done the work to improve the quality of care they are providing children and families. This bill will allow them to sustain their business, stay in operation, and enable their parents to go to work. Implementing the higher reimbursement rate will also increase efficiencies and reduce administrative costs and unnecessary burdens for both the participating providers as well as the contractors and boards. Addressing some of the complexity and administrative demands of the program will likely incentivize more participation and increase the supply of affordable quality childcare. HB 1834 will increase administrative efficiencies, maximize public funds, and increase access to quality childcare, thereby supporting both families and their employers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Claudy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Rubin, thank you for coming here today. Appreciate your testimony. Last week in this committee, I believe we heard a witness that said the child care industry is a, quote, failing business model. Does this bill that brought by Ms. Thompson do anything to address or fix the model, or does this simply provide more money?
No, it definitely serves to fix the model because it's paying the true costs of what part of the model is broken.
Okay.
Sure.
And as far as the state's concerned, we invest tax dollars. This increased contribution, will this result, in your opinion, based upon your experience in the industry, result in more or less care for children in Texas?
I think it will certainly increase more quality care for children, which I strongly believe is what every child deserves, and we'll see huge benefits from it. We're also expecting an increase in the federal allocation for childcare that would be enough to actually serve over 50,000 children, so it would more than compensate for this change in the law. So I think it'll increase access overall.
Okay, let me ask you a final question. Last session, we passed legislation concerning the Rising Star program. You're familiar with that?
I am.
And there's been some complaints since that time that child care has become more expensive, and which has required the need for this bill. Would it be simpler just to rescind or revoke that legislation rather than adopting this legislation?
Definitely not. No, I think that the bar is we want our children, we want to use public funding responsibly, and just putting money in a very bare minimum. The Texas Rising Star program is built to support providers to get to higher quality access, and the bar is pretty low. I don't think that resulted in the higher costs. I think the economy and the true cost of care is what resulted in it. So no, I think we're going in the right direction with this bill.
Okay, so this is additive to the last session's
Completely
legislation.
additive.
Would make a significant improvement for child care in Texas.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you so
And
much.
Let the record reflect Representative Plaza, now present. Good morning. Chair calls Tim Kaminsky. We show you register as Tim Kaminsky, testifying on behalf of Academy and yourself, and that you are for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please go ahead.
Dear Chairman Buttons and members of the committee, my name is Tim Kaminsky, and our family owns the Gingerbread House Daycare in Rosenberg and the Gingerbread Kids Academy in Richmond, Texas. I'm here today speaking on behalf of our child care business, as well as all small child care businesses in Texas, in support of House Bill 1834, which would require local workforce boards to reimburse for the provider's TRS rating regardless of the provider's published rate. The Texas Rising Star program offers 3 levels of quality certification: 2-star, 3-star, and 4-star, to encourage child care and early learning programs to attain progressively higher levels of quality. These certification levels are tied to graduated enhanced reimbursement rates for children receiving child care subsidies or scholarships. However, for years, the subsidy reimbursement rates were below the published rates of most providers. It did not support the cost of providing quality care. Even the graduated reimbursement rates of the voluntary TRS program were so insignificant that most providers that accepted subsidy reimbursements chose not to participate in the program. Currently, about 50% of licensed or registered providers accept subsidies, but only 14% participate in the TRS program. In September of 2021, the Texas legislature enacted legislation requiring all providers in the TWC subsidy system to participate in the TRS program, and in October of 2022, it became mandatory. However, if the legislature is going to mandate the participation in the quality program, then they also need to provide adequate funding to support the cost of providing a quality program and administration program policies that make sense. Under the current subsidy program, a provider cannot be reimbursed for more than what are their published rates, regardless of their star rating. Also, in most cases, If the subsidy reimbursement rate is lower than the published rate, they cannot collect the difference from the parent, so they lose money on a subsidy enrollment. Published tuition rates are based on what the local private pay market can afford to pay. However, this usually comes at the cost of low pay for the child care workers. If a child care program can achieve a higher star quality rating, they shouldn't be penalized financially by not paying them the star rating's maximum rate just because the private pay market can't pay a higher tuition rate. Attached, I've provided you with an example of both financial reimbursement scenarios for our two different centers that participate in the TRS program. One of them is in a low-income area, another one's in the middle-income area. As you can see, the Gingerbread House is a 4-star rated program, but does not receive the highest reimbursement rate, so it is being denied anywhere between $34 and $77 per week. Even if the center did not have a 4-star rating, it would still not get the full TRS regular base rate because the published rate is below the TRS rate. For the Gingerbread Kids Academy, which has just started the process for TRS, the base rate starting out is below the center's published rate, so it will be writing off $32 per week for each subsidized student it enrolls until it achieves a higher star rating. I want to thank Representative Thompson, Representative Morales, and my community representative and fellow Republican J.C. Chaton for introducing this important bill and showing their support for child care businesses in Texas. Since the Texas legislature has mandated that subsidy child care providers participate in the TRS Quality Improvement Program, then it should provide the funding that is needed for quality care and pass House Bill 1834. Thank you for your time, and I'm prepared to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? No. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay. The chair calls Kim Cole from. We show you registered as Kim Cole from, testifying on behalf of children at risk, and that you are for the program. Is this correct?
That is correct.
And you may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and thank you for this opportunity. Good morning, Representative Thompson. My name is Kim Coffrin. I'm the Senior Director of Education for Children at Risk, and I am here to support HB 1834. There are approximately 14,000 child care providers across Texas. Only half of those providers choose to participate in our child care subsidy program through the Texas Workforce Commission to provide child care for the low-income working families. And according to TWC's data, 60% of those child care providers have only about 20% or less of their enrollment dedicated to low-income children. Most child care providers report that they cannot afford to serve more low-income children because of the low reimbursement rates. As you've heard, the current reimbursement rates for child care providers are not based on actual costs. They're based on what families in their community can afford. Texas child care providers set those tuition rates, thinking of their families and making sure they are available for a resource for those families. In Texas, some communities can charge enough to support quality and some cannot. Under current law, local workforce boards cannot reimburse that higher child care providers more than their published rate, even if the local workforce board has a higher minimum reimbursement rate. As Tim laid out, real-world examples, in Dallas County, a Texas Rising Star provider would qualify for $47.04 per day per infant. However, if that child care provider can only charge $35 a day, they're losing $12 a day to serve more low-income children, even though they're already meeting the more stringent requirements and standards. Insufficient funding and low reimbursement rates are why we're seeing a number of child care providers decrease in Texas. You talked about, Representative Clardy asked about Texas Rising Star and those additional resources or additional costs, if that's why we're seeing an increase in those costs. The answer is actually no. Part of that is just inflation and what we've all seen no matter where we are doing. And actually what we have found that during the pandemic, our Texas Rising Star providers fared much better and stayed open. 98% of them stayed open during, of those that stayed open, 98% of them, I'm saying this wrong, 98% of them stayed open during the pandemic. So the supports Texas Rising Star gets and TWC provides those providers is vital to their business. We also realize that its timing is perfect. We're having an increase in child development block grant funds from the feds. About $500 million additional are coming into the state, again, to serve more children. So any decrease that this program might have, that I know is part of that bill analysis that you might see, that should be taken care of with that increase of funding. So there shouldn't be any loss of care. Any children currently in care would not lose coverage. HB 1834 ensures the quality of child care programs in low-income, high-poverty communities receive the same reimbursement rate as quality child care programs in other parts of their community within the same workforce board. Thank you for your time. I encourage you to pass 1834 and happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Thank you very much. The chair calls Reagan Miller. Will show you registered as Reagan Miller testify on behalf of the Texas Workforce Commission. You are neutral on the bill. Is this correct?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me first make a comment. I believe every member in our committee are very passionate about the child care issue. And as we talk about this, even the last session, we know that, Representative Morales, you were there last session. We keep on repeating and also reminding, and we're now embarrassed, too shy to re-emphasize again. The child care is more than a family issue. It is a workforce issue. It is a economic development issue. Don't you agree with that? But the concern is, any bill come to us, we definitely, like to see that there are more resources allocated, but we need to know if the resources are sustainable, because it's easy to make a promise, but if we don't have ways to honor the promise, the result will be very devastating. Don't you agree? So I do have a couple questions, and I know that several members, actually, when they saw this bill coming, they know Ms. T's bills are always very thoughtful and very powerful, too. So they do want to express their concerns, because we love to support, but we also need to have a justification to support this bill. So I have two questions, and then the members, you can jump in and ask your questions. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. First question is, just right one witness mentioned the rate is actually it's not based on the cost. It's based on the family's affordability in this neighborhood. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Under federal law, states are required to set child care reimbursement rates either based on a market rate study, and that looks at the prices that providers are charging parents. Most states, virtually all states do this. The state of New Mexico and the District of Columbia have moved to what they call a cost of quality study, trying to look at some of the underlying factors. But the vast majority of states are using a market rate survey that looks at the price of child care. In Texas, we used to set our reimbursement rates in fiscal year 20 at the 30th percentile. That meant that 70% of all child care programs charged more than that amount. Since that time, we have made incremental increases, and we are now at the 75th percentile in fiscal year 23. That is the federal benchmark that's currently established. Our base rates at the 75th percentile mean that only 25% of providers charge more than our reimbursement rate. That's our base rate. And if you're a Texas Rising Star provider, you do receive an enhanced reimbursement rate, 5, 7, and 9% for 2, 3, and 4 star. Those are the maximum amounts that we will pay. If the amount that you charge your published rate, the amount that you charge parents is lower than that, then we do pay the lower rate.
So based on your assessment, the current rate we are paying to childcare providers, is that fair enough for them to continue their business? Of course, everybody always like to have more money, like I always ask my husband, how come you don't buy me a big diamond ring? And he just says, well, you know what? You cannot eat a big diamond ring. Okay, that's what he was joking, but he's passing out some messages. So based on your, you mean the Texas Workforce Commission's assessment, the rate we're paying out, of course, the Rising Star get extra as a reward, which is wonderful because you do all monitor and track their performance, and that's a kind of a way to reward more efficient, better providers. So comment on the fairness and the matching the market rate. Do you see that there's a major problems to continue to provide good services with the current rate?
So we are.
You mentioned 75%,
Yes.
but I like you to speak in plain English, make
Yes.
sure that everybody can comprehend.
Yeah, so what that really equates to overall is that in most cases, we've raised our rates 40 to 50% over the last 5 years. I think that the childcare industry always struggles. Its workers are generally low paid. I think that childcare programs usually are operating on thin margins, but I think we're doing everything that we can do to make sure that we're setting our rates at the benchmark that's been established at the federal level. And I think that, 40 and 50% increases since fiscal year 20 certainly demonstrate the agency's commitment to taking steps to make sure that our reimbursement rates are reflective of those national goals.
Okay. And then my second question, earlier, another witness, I think is Melanie, maybe I didn't, remember correctly, but I thought it was Melanie. But anyway, one witness mentioned that there are more possibility the federal funding can come in. Can you comment on that federal funding's is that sustainable?
So Congress has been increasing the regular federal block grant year over year, and Texas has seen increases in that. At the same time, all of the federal funds that have been allocated to Texas have been budgeted over the biennium, which will allow us to maintain approximately 140,000 children served per day. In each of the upcoming years, we expect the average cost of childcare to increase as we have more providers coming into the program that have to meet Texas Rising Star quality standards. That was based on the legislation passed last year. So as we have more programs at a higher quality level, we'll be paying them a higher reimbursement rate, and the average cost of care will increase year over year, even as we serve the same number of kids. We did invest some of our stimulus money to serve more children, and these increases in federal funds also help us maintain the same number of kids so we don't have to scale down the number served when the stimulus funding expires. So while Texas is seeing increases in the federal block grant, all of those increases have been budgeted to allow us to remain at 140,000 kids per day over the biennium.
Okay, so has been allocated. So what you're saying is that I'm still not getting that message. Are we continue to have the federal funding, or you just no way to tell? And
Right now, we expect to continue to receive the same amount of federal funding.
Same amount, but now to maintain the
number that we're serving right now.
Without any increase in the subsidy, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what you are saying in plain English is that unless additional money coming in, that the TWC might not be able to pay the extra. Is that what you're saying? Or otherwise, yeah.
So based on the funding that we know is available today to Texas, based on past increases, all of that money is spoken for to allow us to serve 140,000 children per day. If this bill were to pass, we would need to make adjustments to the numbers of children that we were serving because our average cost would increase.
Okay. Okay, members yes, Representative Hayes. I'm sorry, Representative Meza, can you be the next one? I didn't see you. I saw him first. Yeah.
Good morning. The federal reimbursement amount, what is that in dollars?
On average, we pay $32.67 per day, and that's an average.
When you say we, who is we?
The state, in total, when we reimburse for the cost of childcare, on average, it's at $32.67. But it's a very complicated program. Infants receive a much higher reimbursement age than older children. So this is an average of all of those different rates altogether.
Okay. And is that the amount the federal government funds, the $32.67?
There is approximately, it's about $1 billion a year program, and there's about $80 million in state general revenue that's used to draw down federal matching funds. So there is a small state investment, but the vast majority of funding is federal.
All righty. And how many, I was going to ask the question, how many children are affected? You tell me there are 140,000 kids in the program. Is every child receiving, or every provider receiving some type of reimbursement for all 140,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that total dollar amount is what?
So in the first year of the biennium, we estimate it would be $60.6 million, which equates to about 6,700 children. In the second year of the biennium, it's $72.6 million, which equates to about 7,700 children.
And is that the additional dollars that are necessary to fund the program to keep it at the 140,000 kids?
Yes, sir. This would be a reduction from that 140,000 children.
Okay.
How many you talk about? Reduction of the
6,700 children in the first year, 7,700.
hold on. 6,700.
If you want the exact, it's 6,765. And then in the second year, 7,737.
Assuming that we raise the reimbursement rate.
Yes, based on the parameters of this legislation.
So what I'm hearing you say is, if we increase the reimbursement rate, we have to serve less children.
Yes, sir.
Unless we came up, I guess, with more money.
Yes, sir.
And that's what I was trying to figure out on the fiscal note. It says we're spending about $133 million per biennium.
That would be the adding that 60 million and the 72 million together. That would be a total cost of, you would need to increase appropriations by 133 million in order to retain the same number of children, or we fund it out of existing funds and we reduce the number of children.
Okay. And when it says here, in the way the bill is written, each board shall reimburse the Texas Rising Star Program at the board's maximum rate of reimbursement. Is that what the 3267 is? Is that the maximum rate of reimbursement?
That's the average amount of the reimbursement that we are paying.
Okay, what is the maximum rate?
It depends, so it's.
Just average. Yeah.
Let me pull that for you. I don't have that on me, that information on me. There are probably 100 different rates at each board area based on the type of child served and the type of quality program they're enrolled in. But we can look at the average rate for you. It's probably, I'm going to say about maybe 10, well, I don't want to speak, I don't want to
Just
misspeak.
give us a guess, really, because it's close enough for government work.
So generally, generally speaking, we're probably paying about 92% of of the maximum rate that could be paid. So there's probably about an 8% difference between how much we could pay based on the maximum versus what we are paying based upon paying that lower amount, the published rate.
Okay, so I'm not sure if I understood that answer.
Okay.
So my question was, what is the board's maximum rate of reimbursement roughly?
So I'm going to say roughly 8% more than what we're actually paying, roughly 8% more than that $32.67.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so very much. That's very helpful.
Okay. Yes, Representative Meza, please.
Thank you. I think I might be sharing some of the same concern as our chairwoman and co-member Hayes. In the Legislative Budget Board, it says this would result in an overall increase in the total cost of care per child, which would in turn result in a decrease in the number of children served. And that as federal funds would not be increased for this purpose, the increase in the reimbursement rate to providers in Texas Rising Star program would result in a direct reduction of services to children by approximately, the number you said, 6,765 in fiscal year 2024 and 7,737 in fiscal year 2025. So the way I'm picturing it is like the pie is the same size. And when you give bigger slices of the pie, then less people can have a slice. So that pie stays the same size, then they're get more, but less people get to participate in it or share in it. Is that a good analogy, or am I wrong?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so that's kind of concerning. I like the idea of them getting reimbursed a better amount. I can imagine, Ms. T, that you would like for there to be for a direct reduction of services to children by so much, so hopefully you can respond to that when you close. Did you have anything else that you want to add to that?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you very much. Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against HB 1834? The chair recognizes Chairwoman Thompson to close on the bill, and definitely, I know you will have your insights. Yeah.
I close.
Oh,
One of the things that we're trying to do is to get rid of the child care deserts. And we know that there are so many more children who really need to be in daycare. And we have all learned over the years the benefit of having them in daycare, and particularly quality daycare, because when they go to pre-K, they are at a point that they are able to academically function with children in the public school. And that is the thrust. I'm hopeful that we would put more money into this program because there is a great need. I know that in my community, the person who works at McDonald's and has children, and particularly young children, cannot afford to pay a whole lot of money for that child or those children to be taken care of in daycare. And quality daycare is very important. And you know, there's an old expression, you get what you pay for. And I always believe that since I have been here and been able to see a lot of things over the years, you're gonna pay for it either up front or you're gonna pay for it on the back end. I like to pay it up front. I like to be able to have quality daycare, to have children to come and be able to be contributors to society, to be educated, to feel good about themselves, and for society to benefit from the investment that we make in them, rather than not having made that investment. And we end up with a negative to society. And none of you on the dais will live long enough to keep taking care of those people and their children. But we can break this cycle now by making sure that those daycare deserts don't exist and we do pay quality care, and we make the investment, and I think that this is a good area to make investment. We always talk about children. We want the children. We want the children. We got them. Let's do something that is beneficial to the children and society at the same time. I'm available for questions.
Well, Representative Thompson, you know how much, Chairwoman Thompson, Ms. T, you know how much I admire you. And actually, last summer, while I was so busy, because I always have top campaign, and I still took time, I visited 4 child care centers who with Rising Star programs, 3 in South Dallas and 1 in Garland, just outside my district areas. I had spent time to talk to the administrator over there and visit with the children and read books to them and talk to the teachers. And my husband said, why on earth you spend so much time, And I say, because that's where my heart is. And I totally understand your needs and invest in the early childhood is really the most important thing, I think, in terms of education. We need to concentrate. But how come, anyone in our committee serves on the appropriations committee? No, unfortunately not, huh? I served a long time ago, yeah. So I don't know why we're now getting the extra funding from the appropriations committee for this very important, issue here. But now I believe it's probably, I won't say mission impossible, but it's getting really hard at this moment. So I think that the committee's concern is, yes, that's where our heart is, but if we start to dig out a hole, I don't know if TWC be able to compensate, or maybe other employees can cut your salary half, something like that. I don't know if
we can put more money in the program.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have a surplus. We can put money in a program that's going to work.
Yeah, but appropriations, they have to approve that. I hope somebody can use their influence.
We can put more money in the program.
Yeah, if there's any way you can talk to, Chairman Bonner or get
I think we can all talk to him because it's beneficial to our society as a whole.
I believe so. But we gotta have some kind of a commitment that's gonna happen. Otherwise, I think, don't you think I feel kind of, like Representative Meza, you're absolutely right about that. So let's talk about that. But I do appreciate you bring this very important bill to us.
And I appreciate the committee's concern and interest. Sometimes in these daycares, that's the only time these kids have somebody to hug them and tell them they love them.
Yeah.
And believe me, that goes a long ways.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your graciousness this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. T. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that. HB 1834 will be left pending at this time. The chair lays out HB 79 and offers a committee substitute. Chair recognizes the very passionate Representative Tallarico to explain the bill, and thank you so much for being patient.
Thank you, Chair Button, Vice Chair Ordaz, and committee members. Before I go into the bill, just wanted to give you a little background about me because it's relevant to this bill. So I was born to a single mom who left home in Laredo at 19 and moved up here to Austin. She met my birth father, who was a 21-year-old high school dropout whose drinking problem sometimes led to violence. And one night he became violent again, and my mom made the decision to pack all our stuff and leave. And thankfully, she worked for a hotel in East Austin, and the manager at the hotel let me and her stay in one of the rooms until we could find a more permanent place to live. So the graciousness from her employer, that relief from her employer, made all the difference in our lives and in my life. So that's why I'm bringing this bill. HB 79 would provide survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking with 5 days of work leave to care for themselves and stabilize their situation. Under House Bill 79, survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault could take leave from work to relocate to a safe place, secure a restraining order, seek medical attention, attend court appearances, and handle other necessary affairs related to their situation. Hopefully you have a copy of the committee substitute in front of you. Just want to quickly lay out some of the differences between the original filed version of the bill. So the sub states that the bill applies only to employers with 15 or more employees. It defines the amount of leave an employee is allowed, 5 days per calendar year, and it aligns the documentation requirements with other domestic violence statutes. So an example would be the documentation required for a domestic violence victim to receive unemployment benefits. Happy to answer any questions and reserve my right to close.
Members? Okay, members, yeah. Representative, Hayes first, and you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Do you have a sense for how many employees this would apply to on an annual basis? That is, put in other words, like how many people are subject to family violence, sexual assault, and stalking and are working?
Well, and I want to clarify, that would be the total people that may take advantage of this, but to take advantage of it, you've got to provide some clear documentation, which is listed out in the bill. And would have to be using the leave to do certain things, which are also laid out in the bill. So that's gonna curtail the amount of people who are taking advantage of this opportunity for 5 days of paid leave. And again, those 5 days are spread out over a calendar year, so it's not necessarily a week. It's, if you've got a court appearance you've got to get to, that's 1 day, right? If perhaps you are leaving a dangerous situation like my mom did, and you need to try to find other housing, then that would be, 1 or 2 days. So, and to do all that, you'd still have to provide that clear documentation. So I want to just quickly, and you may see this in the sub, but some of the things that you could submit as documentation is an active or recently issued protective order, documenting sexual assault, stalking, or family violence against the employee, a police record, documenting sexual assault of the employee or family violence against or the stalking of the employee, a physician statement or other medical documentation that describes the sexual assault of the employee or family violence against the employee, or written documentation from a family violence center or rape crisis center that describes the sexual assault of the employee or family violence against the employee. So we try to put in place some rigorous standards, so that way this program is really benefiting the folks who need it most.
Okay, and where I was going with that, I'm trying to get a sense for number of employees. What would be the cost to the employers? Do you have any kind of sense for what that might be?
So this is not paid leave, I should clarify. And I know there are some proposals out there for paid leave. This does not require that time off to be compensated. All that's required is that you can't fire the employee for that leave, and that they are entitled to when they return from that leave, whether it's a day or a couple days, are entitled to return back to the same job they had earlier. Because what's happening is that, victims of domestic violence or sexual assault are having to do this stuff anyway, and they're often penalized at their workplace because they don't have this protection in statute. And it leads to an even more vicious cycle. So the idea behind this bill is to disrupt that cycle where folks are victims and then they become victims again because they're penalized at their place of work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hayes.
Representative, Sean?
Yes, Representative Talarico, I appreciate you sharing your personal story. And I think those of us who have had businesses or employed individuals, I think the understanding and the generosity that we have as employers, I think prevails out there across the state for the most part, okay? When I look at your legislation and look at what you have here, the rigidity of it from a standpoint of applying across the board and across the state, Basically, what we're trying to do is govern behavior of the employer, okay? And it just creates a little bit of concern because I do believe that if you have a good relationship with employer-employee, I think there's a lot of grace that takes place in those relationships. I know I experienced that with people that work for me, and I don't even hesitate. Okay, and I think that's true for most folks. So I'm not so sure how we legislate good behavior in that. I mean, we talk about legislating behavior all the time in the legislature. It's a little bit different twist, okay? Because it not only affects maybe one life, it may affect the lives of minors in your particular case. You have any kind of response for me on that?
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate your comments, Representative Shine. The only thing and I think that's true, if you're working, and we partly why we're excluding small businesses is because that relationship is usually there. But if you're working for Amazon, they don't have that relationship with Jeff Bezos, right? Or if you're working
you should have a lower level manager, shouldn't you?
Sure, but some of these jobs, if you're working for a giant corporation, there's not always policies in place to ensure that grace. Even if that manager maybe wants to help you, doesn't have that opportunity, right? And so that's what we're trying to go after. We're not, those small businesses where there is that relationship and they have the authority to help a victim of domestic violence, we don't want to mess with that, and that's why the sub excludes them. What we're trying to get at is these giant corporations that don't have these places.
So how do you exclude them?
So the sub states that the bill applies only to employers with 15 or more employees.
Well.
Go ahead, Chair.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Let me jump in.
Yes.
Actually, most of the major corporations, I'm familiar with, they usually, I don't think they prohibit that. They will up to the individual managers or supervisors to make the rule and make that decision. And, this is free market. If they feel like this company, whatever, and XYZ, has this kind of negative culture for caring of the employees, they can leave. Right now, unemployment rate is so low, they can go to work for somebody else. I comment on your bringing up this idea, and I appreciate that very much. And definitely, that is our concerns too. Earlier in our session, remember that we passed Dean Craddock's the workforce violence hotline bill, just like that, because people feel like that would be easy to handle, and but that's definitely needed. But your bill, it's a very, very good idea. It's a very kind idea, and I want to compliment you on that. I believe everybody share the same, but might be kind of difficult to administrate that bill, that situation. So let's continue to talk about that, okay? Yeah, and I do appreciate that very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And I know we have witnesses that can talk about how this isn't working for so many victims across the state. And there are some companies, there are some employers that are doing this out of the kindness of their heart, or especially, Chair Button, you mentioned, if you're a college educated, which I think most of us probably are, if you're working for an employer that's trying to attract you, then they probably offer some benefits like this. But folks like my mom who are just cleaning rooms at a hotel, they're not trying to attract you in the same way they try to attract folks that are in our position. And so that's the goal, is to provide that protection. And we provide protections like this all the time, including on private businesses. And so I think this is something that's common sense, something that's needed, and something that will do a great deal of good for a lot of folks and a lot of women across our state. But we do have some witnesses that I think can also speak to it.
Hold on. Let me look at. We have
several registered.
We have several registered there for the bill.
But none wishing to testify.
but none wish to testify.
Well, I lied then. We don't have a witness to testify, but
Okay, all right.
I'm sure they would love to talk about it after.
Yeah, but let me still repeat this, okay,
Yeah.
just in case. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against HB 79? Okay, the chair recognizes Representative Tallarico to close on the bill.
Thank you, Chair Button. Thank you, committee members, for hearing the bill. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Representative Massa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for employers who are kind-hearted and good-hearted, this bill, they'll be fine with it. For the ones who are not so kind-hearted, then they need this bill maybe. To say that a woman who's in a situation of being a employee at a hotel, cleaning rooms or whatever, if you got to take a day off and I don't give it to you and you don't like it, go somewhere else. There are plenty of other jobs. I don't think is very kind-hearted on the part of us as legislators or employers, but there are employers out there like that feel like if you don't like it, go, I can get somebody else. So I think it's good to allow some time off. It does take some time, as you said. Sometimes there are court appearances, looking for another place, and the 15-plus employees, I think, is reasonable, and the 5 days off sounds reasonable. I guess.
Well, and this is always a balance we have to strike, right? We as elected officials represent our constituents, and when there's a conflict between private business and constituents, we try to find a balance to where we provide enough protection without being overly burdensome. And I'm happy to work with anybody on the committee if we feel like this doesn't quite strike that balance and we want to figure out language or tweaks, and I'm happy to do that. I do want to just recognize that we strike that balance all the time. And we have common sense regulations on businesses. You can't use child labor to in your place of business, and that's a common sense regulation we've put in place as government officials. So happy to work with anyone on the committee to make sure we're striking that balance.
So we can't legislate what somebody feels in their heart and mind, but we can legislate their behavior.
That's right. And, I think all of us here are committed to family values, and this I feel like is a family values bill. And we just want to make sure that those family values have a baseline level of protection for moms out there who are trying to take care of little kids like me.
Thank you, Representative Tallarico.
Thank you
From a
so
single
much.
mom.
Okay, go ahead.
This is just more of a comment, but Representative, thank you for bringing this, and really thank you for sharing your personal story. That's not easy to do, and so I appreciate the intent and the work that you're putting behind this. I'd love to sign on to this bill if you have room for me, but thank you for your work and advocacy on this.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much for bringing this bill to us.
Thank you, Chair.
Members, any questions for Representative Tallarico? The substitute is withdrawn, and HB 79 will be left pending at this time. The chair lays out HB 4401 and recognizes Representative Hall.
I got the number wrong.
Oh.
It's 4011.
Okay, 4011. Okay, the chair lays out HB 4011 and recognizes Representative Hall to explain the bill. Good morning. Thanks for your patience.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to lay out House Bill 4011. Currently, daycares can earn a Texas Rising Star certification by applying to the Texas Workforce Commission, demonstrating that they have met quality standards adopted by the commission that exceed the state's minimum child care regulation standards. The application is currently all self-reported information. It has become a concern that TWC has no real way of pulling back the curtain to see whether the daycare is truly exceptional in all aspects, as they are not authorized to consider additional information beyond the application. TWC has no way of accessing any report of a serious incident at the daycare, including violations of their child care license or DFPS investigations. If the daycare becomes Texas Rising Star certified, they are eligible for federal funds towards tuition assistance. If the goal is to incentivize these schools to exceed expectations to provide quality daycare to kids eligible for tuition assistance, there should be more transparency regarding their licensing history. HB 4011 would require TWC in determining the daycare's rating under the Texas Rising Star program to consider comments from parents and teachers and information on any DFPS investigations and information from HHSC regarding their child care license, including violations of minimum standards. By adding these considerations, we can ensure that daycares certified by Texas Rising Star are truly quality daycares that parents and families can be assured have been vetted. I'm happy to answer any questions and like to reserve the right to close.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Representative Hull, so looking at the bill, I don't see anything specific as far as thresholds that might be levels of disciplinary action that could take place. For example, if you just have one parent that makes I guess an approach, or 2 or 3 or 5, how would that function from a disciplinary standpoint, or actions based on maybe some sort of threshold or matrix of a threshold?
It would be up to them. I'm happy if you think that something should be put in here.
It's kind of open-ended.
Yeah, it was left up to
Because you
left
have
up to
one
them.
person that's disgruntled.
Well, I guess if they looked at it and felt like it wasn't something that was valid, if there were all of these other claims, maybe they realized it was one person and it was like a disgruntled, and it wasn't a valid, then they could say that it didn't apply or something like that. But if you think that there needs to be some more kind of a threshold there, I'm happy to look at that.
Something in regards to something that triggers
right
disciplinary action rather than just verbiage. I mean, this takes place, or a number of these events take place, and then you have something that drives an action.
Right.
Okay, that's where I'm going with that.
I completely see what you're saying. The bill was just intended just for them to have to consider it, so it doesn't prescribe any action. But if you think that would...
Well, we can all consider a lot of things and just
yes.
let it go.
Well, I'm happy to change some of that and put that in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Members, any questions? Yeah, we do have a witness. Thank you. We'll ask you to come back, okay? The chair calls Reagan Miller. We show you registered as Reagan Miller, testifying on behalf of Texas Workforce Commission, and that you are on the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so any prepared statement or just up to us to ask questions?
I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, any questions?
Do you want
Go
to
ahead. Yeah, Representative
if you'd like to
Sean's
address my
concern.
question
Yeah.
on a threshold or
Yes,
how
sir.
action takes place.
Yes, sir. So under our current process, as the representative said, the initial application is self-reported information. That's the application that they submit saying, I'd like to be Texas Rising Star. But following that, we actually have processes in place that consider licensing violations implemented by the Health and Human Services Commission Child Care Regulation. So we have a list of what we consider to be critical deficiencies. So if you were applying to become Texas Rising Star and you had a background check deficiency, you would not be eligible to even apply. If you were currently Texas Rising Star and you had a background deficiency, you would face a star level drop, which means you go from a 4-star to a 3-star. You'd be put on 6 months probation and you couldn't have any other related deficiencies. So we have some current processes in place that do consider HHSC child care regulation deficiencies. We are not privy to the details of a DFPS abuse and neglect
Is that
investigation.
because of confidentiality and protection for the individual due to court
Yes, sir.
possibilities? Okay.
Yes, sir, but child care regulation will take an action based upon those investigations. So while we don't know the details of the investigation, we would then follow.
You can at least take an initiative.
Yes. So.
That's good. Yes, Representative Hayes.
thank you. This is probably more appropriate on the last bill, but it dawned on me. Besides the Rising Star program, are there other child care programs that the Workforce Commission helps underwrite and fund and oversee?
Related to childcare?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so we do have other initiatives that focus, for example, on improving the professional development opportunities for childcare workers. So we have other quality improvement activities that we administer at the state, and then each board is directed to use 4% of their annual allocation, which is about $40 million this year, to develop and design local quality improvement initiatives. So that could include things like purchasing curriculum and providing training to childcare programs at the local level, providing during COVID, we found a lot of boards investing in wage supplements, so hiring bonuses to bring on new staff to improve the quality of care, purchasing curriculum, paying for scholarships for those teachers to get their CDA or associate's degrees. So there are a variety of quality improvement activities that we administer.
Okay, and besides those, are there other programs where they actually fund money for the kids themselves? Like you said, the last program was $1 billion. Like, are there other funds for other programs?
No, that is our primary program, the Child Care Services Program, at about $1 billion a year.
Okay, thank you.
And we support about 140,000 kids per day.
All right, thank you so much.
Yes.
Members, any questions? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against HB 4011? The chair recognizes Representative Hall to close on the bill.
Thank you for allowing me to lay this bill out. A couple quick things. One right now, what she was talking about with HHSC and what they have access to. From what they have shared with us, they only have access to publicly available information. So this bill isn't saying to ask for the details and info on the investigations, but just that they have reason to believe. And so it's just to make it about licensing and DFPS review. So if there's not any other questions, then I'm happy to talk further, Representative Shine, about the things that you talked about. So unless I close.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for Representative Hall? HB 4011 will be left pending at this time. The chair lays out HB 2058 and offers a committee substitute. The chair recognizes Representative Gemace to explain the bill.
Good morning, Chairwoman and members. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to lay out HB 2058
Good morning.
and its committee substitute. Thank you. So this is a bill, ladies and gentlemen, that we've been talking about an awful lot in our district for over the past 2 years. And it was the innovative idea from some of our local stakeholders to create a task force. We worked very closely with our local Cameron County Workforce Commission and have seen that they've done amazing things for the Valley and all over. But sometimes their focus is not solely on, for example, one specific item. And in this case, it's directing the influx of the necessary skilled labor that we need in the Valley and pretty much across the state of Texas. But this is a local bill right now, sort of a test trial that would last 2 years and expire in 2027. So this specific skilled labor task force would operate under the direction and the guise of our Cameron County workforce, but it would create it would allow for the appointment of 17 members to be appointed by the board. And we really wanted to focus on getting a cross-section of the community. It would incorporate local government officials, members of post-secondary institutions, members of our current local public school districts, members from the district attorney's office, and local business leaders. In particular, we want to focus on incorporating local business leaders and stakeholders who have their ear and their feet to the ground saying, this is what we need. We know business is coming, and the first thing they ask is, do we have the foundational, for example, land resources we need? And then secondly, how are you going to satisfy our need for skilled labor, the manpower that we need? So we would love for this task force under the bill to operate underneath and in cooperation with our local Cameron County workforce, and after the expiration of 2 years, make recommendations to the legislature and to the governor's office on what we need to satisfy our local workforce needs. And we hope that with this innovative idea, we can utilize our local interest and stakeholders to really get that skilled labor that we need. And with that, I think we have one resource witness, but I do believe we have several members who've signed, or individuals who've signed on in support of the bill, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So we're forming a task force to work with another task force.
To work with the local Cameron County board, yes, sir.
Okay. This is basically local.
Yes, sir. It would be a test trial, pretty much, for 2 years to expire in 2020, or I apologize, 4 years.
Which is local, I mean, 17 people, the more people you add, don't you start decline, isn't there a kind of a declination of efficiency once you start adding a whole lot more people to the process?
I have seen that sometimes. In this case, we just really wanted to make sure that we had a broad cross-section of the community. For example, even in this case, inviting the district attorney's office to see what can we do at the ISDs to identify at-risk youth. What can we do to get you employed as quickly as possible?
So this task force would be totally separate. The membership would be the members of the membership would be totally different than the members of the existing local force.
Correct, sir. You could not.
We got 34 people that are going to be meeting.
17 who would make a recommendation to the other board. They wouldn't necessarily meet at the same time.
But they
or
still
together.
need to interact and what have you.
I suppose if they wanted to voluntarily,
Okay. I mean, it's local, so I'm not really challenging from the standpoint that you've got something that you want to do there on a local basis. It's just, I always see when you have big groups like that, I just wonder sometimes how effective or how efficient they are in actually achieving any real goals of what you're trying to accomplish. That's all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I would hope that their interaction would mainly consist of their handing over their recommendation to the workforce.
But again, if this is what you guys want to do in your local area, I'm fine with that. I just you know, it's kind of like, you know, I just look at the efficiency and the effectiveness of large groups trying to accomplish things, that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Shine.
Thank you very much. We'll call you back.
Thank you.
Okay. The chair calls Courtney Arbor. We show you registered as Courtney Arbor. Testify on behalf of Texas Workforce Commission that you are on the bill. Members, any questions for Ms. Arbor? No? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against HB 2058? Chair recognizes Representative Gomez to close on the bill.
Thank you again, Chairwoman and members. I would just respectfully pray for your support and consideration moving forward to LNC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The substitute is withdrawn, and HB 2058 will be left pending at this time. Okay. There being no further business, the Committee on International Relations and Economic Development is now adjourned.